The cart was full of wood, attached to his horse, and was ready to go. So, Rylan climbed into the driver's seat, and with a whip of Sawdust's reins, they were off. The journey was always slow. It had to be. The roads that paved his way down the mountain on which he lived were far too steep for any kind of hasty travel. So, Rylan took this time to take in the sights of Borderskim Valley. The great blue rivers that snaked through the rolling green hills that made up this beautiful part of the West was one of the many things that made the Kingdom of Nor great, and what made Rylan proudly lived here. There wasn't a house, cabin, or even a shack on Rylan's trip down the mountain. In fact, Rylan had often caught himself referring to it as his mountain from time to time because of how he was the only one that lived on it. It didn't tarry his pride, though. It only made him happier as he continued his journey through the near-endless pine forest that spread out before him. He was on the road for another hour or two before he finally spied the walls of Borderskim hamlet, the only real thing that popped into the heads of non-locals when they heard the name Borderskim. He smiled and leaned forward. "There it is, girl. Let's hope Bainin has something better than last time for us. The land can only give me so much. I'll need that coin if I want to eat for the next 3 months. That goes for you too." The gates were always open in Borderskim, so the guards either side of them put up no resistance as he entered the hamlet. In fact, they even smiled at him, recognizing him from all the other times he passed through. Rylan said nothing. He simply smiled and waved at them, as small talk was never a strength of his. Borderskim was small, at least when compared to other hamlets around the west, let alone the whole kingdom. The streets were wide, though, and long, allowing for easy cart travel through the hamlet. Sawdust pulled the cart through the streets until Rylan was able to see they were quickly approaching the local base of the Western Trading Company. Easily the biggest building in all of Borderskim by far, given its purpose as both an office and a warehouse, and was undoubtedly the main source of income for the hamlet. Rylan parked Sawdust sent her cart outside the building by a number of other stationary carts and made his way to the door. Inside was a large collection of traders all spread out among the varying offices and desks of the trading company, conducting their business with the company's officials. Some things never change, Rylan thought to himself. He then made his way to the office of Bainin, whose door was wide open as per usual. Upon looking inside, he saw Bainin was jotting something down on parchment, lit closely by a single candle that almost licked his jaw as he wrote. Bainin was an older man, with sharp of cheek and long of face, with a mass of short dirt-brown hair to boot. Rylan knocked on the doorframe. "You busy?" Bainin flicked his gaze up at him. "Oh, Rylan!" He gestured towards the seat in front of him with a flick of his hand. Come in, please. Have a seat." Rylan forced a smile and did as the trader asked. Bainin placed his hands together and set them down on his desk. "So, how have things been up on Mount Rylan?" Rylan let out a single humourless laugh. If only it were called that. "But if I had the coin..." Bainin nodded and raised a hand. Of course. What have you got for me this week?" Rylan crossed his arms. "Same as usual, Bainin. You know me. Never late on my deliveries." "Indeed," Bainin said, the pep from his voice suddenly gone. He then fell silent as he opened a drawer on the right side of his desk and pulled out an assortment of parchment. He leafed through a select few, taking time to read certain pages longer than others, before jotting 1 or 2 things down on a couple of them. He looked up at Rylan. 50 gold for the whole." Rylan's face dropped. "Are you joking?" He uncrossed his arms and placed his hands firmly on the desk. "Last week it was 60. A month or so before that it was 100. Could be wrong, but when I first started trading with you, I was getting between 500 and 400 gold a month." Bainin raised his arms defensively. I know. But the company's been taking heavy losses. Been taking them for about 20 years too. Long before you even started trading with us. Facts are facts. That damn war has taken its toll on everyone." "Hey," Rylan pointed at Bainin. "My father died in that war. Show some respect." All right. I'm sorry. But you have to admit, even after 2 decades, the fact that we're still feeling its effects only speaks to how much the kingdom has suffered." Rylan sighed. "So that's it? Only 50 for all my work?" Bainin shrugged. "Well, you could always try another trading outpost." He leaned back. "But the nearest one isn't for another 10, 20, maybe even 30 leagues from here. So good luck if you choose to do that." Rylan balled his hands into fists as he stared at the thinly veiled, smug look on the trader's face. The coin was getting smaller and the supplies were getting lower. Soon it would get to the point where Rylan wouldn't know what to do if he still wished to live on his mountain. Alas, Bainin had him by the throat, and Rylan was smart enough not to waste any more of his time. He stood up. 10 minutes, he said, as blunt as a punch to the gut. "You get your pine, and I have someone waiting by my cart with my payment. Deal?" Bainin smiled. Make that 15 to 20 minutes. Then you have a deal. Rylan grumbled under his breath. Fine. He turned and left without any more words and walked back towards the exit to the building. But, as he made his way further into the entrance hall, he came across a small group of people talking to one another. He recognized them, farmers mostly who had come from the neighbouring towns, hamlets and villages to peddle their wares, just as Rylan had. There were a total of 5 of them, all of whom he knew, but hadn't talked to for a good few months other than a friendly hello every now and then. He glanced outside at his cart of wood, knowing that it would be a while before Bainan's men would be done loading it off. So, he went over to the group to see what they were chatting about, waving to them as they noticed him approaching. "Afternoon, folks," he said, trying to insert a semblance of friendliness into his voice. "How have you all been?" They looked at him, not a sound coming from them, their faces pale and almost ghost-like. "Not interrupting anything, am I?" A livestock farmer by the name of Lest smiled at him. "Not at all, Rylan," he said in a humourless monotone. "Just chewing the fat as we always do." Lest was old and was always unkempt and dirty, as if the word bath meant nothing to him. His hair was thin and his beard was short and fuzzy, and he had an eye that always seemed to be looking in a different direction. "Been keeping safe, I hope?" asked Shonwen. "There hasn't been anything strange going on there."
"Oh, come off it, Shonny,"
said her husband, Marek.
"This fella lives so far up a mountain the entire kingdom could be on fire and he would have no idea."
Marek and Shonwen always travelled together. That was because it was Shonwen who was the one who knew how to do the trading and work the crops. Her husband just provided some extra muscle. Shonwen always seemed to wear an old dusty hooded robe when she travelled, with her grey-brown hair prying out from the sides of her hood, whereas her husband simply wore a cap, a light tunic, and a pair of awkwardly short breeches. Rylan raised an eyebrow at the couple. "What are you on about?" Shonwen looked to her right, at Derek, another livestock farmer whose brow was heavy and arms crossed. "We've had a little trouble over the past few months," said Derek. He was around the same age as Rylan, and was clearly the one who took the most care of himself. "Well, I've got a bit of time to waste," Rylan said, gesturing at the carts outside. "Mind filling me in?" Derek sighed. "Well, for me it all started around 3 months ago. My cows had started to give off sour milk. Did this for almost a week before I noticed that some of them were disappearing. Then, one day..." His face grimaced as he trailed off, as if he were falling deep into a dark thought. "Dead. Massacred. Almost the whole herd. When I got up that morning, all I found were corpses, some of which hadn't even been chewed on, just torn apart." He shook his head. "Only have 1 bull, 3 cows and a couple of calves left. Barely had anything to turn a profit this week. God's help me, I'll make the next." "Well, hell, Derek," Rylan said. "I'm very sorry. I can only hope whatever did..."
"That ain't where the story ends, tree chopper,"
Les broke in, pointing a bony finger at Rylan.
"Oh, that ain't where the story ends at all.